Welcome back to KHTS Radio. You are on the air with KHTS Co-News Director Jade Aubuchon, and I'm here today with another City Council candidate for our 2022 election, Mr. Kody Amour. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
That's right. Thank you. Good to be
Excellent.
here.
Very nice to meet you. Why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself?
I'm running for city council, and I am a homeless resident in Santa Clarita. And so I'm bringing forth a new perspective, a new platform that I think addresses the social, political, economic issues that we face in our city. I believe that the people who are currently in office are not doing a good enough job at solving homelessness, at addressing affordable housing, addressing the water shortages. There's lots of different problems that there's a lot of cracks in the system. And when you are part of when you face the adversities caused by those problems, you get a really good understanding of why these things are the way that they are. And so I'm trying to bring a solution to those problems.
Very nice. What do you believe is the top three most pressing concerns for our community?
So the number one concern in this community is homelessness, I think. And the reason is because even though not everyone is homeless, people fear homelessness. And when they see that in Santa Clarita there's only 60 emergency shelter beds. And so they know that if they become homeless, if they can't afford the rent, then they're going to be kicked out and they're going to be street homeless, which is way worse than shelter homeless. I'm shelter homeless. I live at the only homeless shelter. And so, I see what happens when people go out in the streets. It's really scary. Unfortunately, the death rate of being homeless relative to the size of the homeless population is somewhere between 1 and 10%. So if it is 10%, that's like the Black Plague. That's like experiencing the Black Plague. If you get it, then it's scary. It's really scary. So people don't want to be in that position, and so they're willing to work really hard to fight the rising rents. And we have an affordable housing crisis. Landlords just want to keep increasing the rent. I hear a lot of council members talk about supply and demand. And it doesn't make sense to just talk about supply and demand and keep it that basic because housing is an inelastic good. It is something that people can just increase the price forever and people will keep paying it because they don't want to become homeless. It's just too scary. And so we have to recognize that the landlords are doing that. They're just raising the rents, and someone needs to come in and do something. That's the first most pressing concern. The second most pressing concern, I believe, is the lack of high-paying jobs. 3 out of 4 workers living in Santa Clarita commute outside of Santa Clarita to work, and that's because we don't have enough jobs here that are paying high wages. All we have is a bunch of service and retail economic jobs. So you can be a cashier, you can work at a fast food restaurant or something, and you'll get paid $15 an hour. And people at the homeless shelter, the workers there are getting paid $15 an hour, which is so sad because it's too low. They're working really hard, and we can restructure the economy so that we can focus instead of service and retail, but high-paying jobs like manufacturing and construction. And I mean, there's the industrial jobs, and the industrial businesses, those business owners are really good business owners. Their vacancy rate in the industrial businesses is only 0.17%. So when you give a business owner who has an industrial business commercial property, they know how to use it. People who are in the retail and service economy, they have offices or medical office spaces. The vacancy rate for office spaces and medical office spaces is 14%. And for retail, it's 5%, but it's also, we have a lot of retail. And so when you go and you see those empty stores and you also see homeless people, it's all very interconnected. If we can bring the high-paying jobs back here, people aren't going to need to commute anymore. The traffic congestion problem can be solved if we can bring the jobs here. There's only 3 ways of leaving Santa Clarita, and that causes traffic congestion if we don't have the high-paying jobs here. And the third most pressing concern is water shortages. Passaic Lake is 34% capacity, which is very scary. If we run out of water, then I don't know what we're going to do. We have like these stages. SCV Water has stages. We're in stage 2, and in stage 5, they reduce, I believe, 50% of your water by force. They're going to start sending out maybe police to make sure that water is properly used. This is a very scary thing to talk about, but it's Castaic Lake is 34% empty, and so we need to find a way to get water, to produce water, to recycle water. We recycle. It's 0.1. It's less than 1% of our water use is recycled, and it's really low. It's 0.6% of our water is recycled, and then that water is used for 2 things: the plants on the medians and a golf course, which I mean, it's so backwards, and it's so frustrating, like knowing all of this and seeing it and experiencing some of the adversities. And so my goal is to address those problems once and for all.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing those with us.
Thank you.
What skills and experience would you bring to the city council if you were elected?
That's a great question. I don't have any political experience. I've never been in politics. I've read a bunch of books. I could say that much, but I can't say that I've gone to school for a political degree, or I've been a politician before. But at the same time, I think the city is ready to accept that we can move forward if we bring new perspectives. And there's a lot of candidates running who bring new perspectives. And just to name a few, I think Dave and Jeff bring great perspectives. That's something that I bring, is a new perspective, and my perspective comes from the adversities of experiencing homelessness. But the other thing is, I'm a mathematician. I have a degree in mathematics. I used to teach at Arizona State University, and then I moved to Arizona Christian University. I taught math there, and so I'm a mathematician. I can go through the budget, and I can see, wow, look how they've increased police funding by 50% over the last decade. I can see that, and I can also see how they spent, 2 years ago, they spent $5.5 million for fire protective services, and the next year they only spent, I think it was around $500,000 to $600,000 for fire protective services, and this year the number's $38,000. I don't understand that, but when I look at that, I can understand that's wrong. It doesn't make sense. Someone should explain this. And so I can go through a budget and I can see all these things and see where the money is going, where the money isn't going. One more great example of this is I know that because of Measure H from the sales tax, $8 million of your taxpayer dollars in Santa Clarita is every year going to LA County to quote unquote solve homelessness. But it never gets solved. What happens? The shelter is underfunded. If we're giving $8 million to address homelessness, where is homelessness being solved? Well, LA County has made their decision. They're not solving it here. They're solving it in LA City. And the reason why this city council is perfectly okay with that is because they want people like me, the poor, people who can't afford their rents. They want them to move down there where they can, feel a little bit more comfortable about how homelessness is being addressed over there. If something goes wrong, well, at least they have a shelter to go to. Right? People can't say that here. I would say every day, 10 people show up to the homeless shelter, and they're denied homeless shelter because the beds are full, and they're always full. And I tell people you have to keep calling in. And it's too bad that we're in this situation because Santa Clarita is the 3rd largest city in LA County, and we only have one shelter with 60 beds. They're building a new shelter, but they're only adding 38 beds. And it costs $6 million to do that.
For 98 beds.
For a total of 98 beds. And then what are they going to do with the old beds, the 60 beds that are right there right now on Pine Street? They're going to probably tear it down. The landlord, it gets to decide whatever happens to those properties. I think it should stay a homeless shelter. It's designed as a homeless shelter. I know it's not like, fancy. If you look at the new shelter design, you'll be surprised at how fancy it is, because it's a homeless shelter. The priority here should be to house people, to give someone a place to stay. And it's clear that that's not where the money's going. And I can see it. And I know that the people who are in office can see it too. And that's why, I'm trying to bring awareness to those things. And I'm bringing those experiences and skills to try to expose these problems and hold the people in power accountable. And my candidacy is sort of a political leverage towards that.
All right. Well, speaking on homelessness, obviously you don't feel that the city is offering enough support to that part of our population. What would your approach look like?
Okay, so that's a great question. Right now, so with the $8 million, it's sent to LA County, and they give it to LAHSA, amongst other things, I think. And then LAHSA funds our homeless shelter.
Yeah.
So LAHSA is like this middleman in between your taxes and the shelter. And they're taking a lot of it. They're taking the salary, the board member salaries at LAHSA, and I hope they're listening, because this is juicy details. The CEO of LAHSA makes over, I believe, $250,000 a year. And then if you go down the board members, each one, it's like 200,000, 200,000, 200,000, 150,000, 150,000, 150,000. I don't understand how you can make so much money solving homelessness. You're supposed to be public servants. And so they're taking some of that money, and then they solve homelessness outside of Santa Clarita. We need to cut out the middleman. That's the solution. We need to stop. We need to stop. I think we need to stop taxing sales, because it's a regressive tax, for one. And I think we need to try to separate ourselves as much as possible from LA County, because LA County, it's one of the most corrupt. I'm going to say it's one of the most corrupt government institutions in the world, and we should not. They have bad county hospitals. Losses really bad. The sheriffs have 18 gangs, and I can keep going. We should not be picking and choosing which institutions are good and which ones are not. I'll break the news. They're all bad. They're all taking money. They're all corrupt. And so if we can separate ourselves from them as much as possible, we can spend the money directly towards the homeless shelter. Now, the homeless shelter, their board, their CEO makes a salary. I think it's pretty good. It's like a little bit over $100,000, which I think is fair for someone who's leading an entire company. Every single other board member makes nothing. That's according to their taxes from 2017, 2018, and 2019. I think that's amazing. Why don't we give them money? They seem like they actually care about solving homelessness, but they don't give enough. They don't get enough money. They're not getting $8 million. That's for sure. They're not getting $8 million every year.
That's fascinating. Connected to the issue of homelessness, I know that one of the solutions that people are proposing is building more housing. The question is what type of housing? Because on the other side of things, people are complaining, especially with the traffic that we've seen this week up in Castaic, that overdevelopment is an issue. What do you think of that?
That's a great question. So I don't see any reason we should be developing at all right now. We have 3,000 empty properties that we could be living in right now. I could be living in. I'm living at the shelter, and there's 3,000 empty properties. I don't think we have a shortage of housing. I mean, if you look at the U.S., there's 17 million empty houses and only 600,000 homeless people. And so that's I think 6 or 7. I probably did the math wrong. 6 or 7 houses per homeless person, empty houses. And so the concept of developing houses presupposes that we somehow have a shortage of houses, that we need to increase the supply. But I think that housing is not only just inelastic, that just like insulin, you can just raise the prices forever and charge them whatever you want, but it's also post-scarce, meaning that there's more supply than potential demand. We can house all the homeless people right now, and we'd still have a bunch of empty houses. and then we can move people from one house to another, and we can keep everyone housed. I think what we need is we don't need to build more houses, for one. I think we need to tax the landlords who fail to fill their properties. If you're a landlord, you're an investor, but you're also someone who manages a home. And it's so easy for landlords to just throw out the second thing there, the ladder. They just care about the profits. But no, you have a home. Someone could be sleeping in that home. And so if someone could be sleeping in that home, then let's fill the home. And right now, there's no financial disincentive to fill the home because the landlord is thinking, well, what if I don't make a profit? What if the person destroys my home? I don't like that person. They don't have a high credit score. They might not be able to pay their rent every month, right? These are the excuses that the landlords make up. Oh, what about my profits? And I think we need to completely switch the model. We need to pressure landlords with a vacancy tax and with rent caps so that we can, if your property is vacant for 50 days or more during a calendar year, then you should pay a property tax. I think it should be a 10% property tax. When I do the math, it would be more expensive to pay the vacancy tax if it's 10% than to just fill the home. And so here's the thing. Landlords don't have to pay a vacancy tax. They don't have to pay a vacancy tax if they just fill the homes. Now, yes, that might require the landlord to lower their rent. And this is where we get into the affordable housing thing, is that with a vacancy tax, you pressure landlords across the board to lower their rent so that they can fill their empty properties. They don't want to face that financial disincentive. And then you have rent caps, which is going to prevent rent from going, I would say, over 30% of a person's income. And I think that there should be, it's going to be a complex system. And I think that a housing commission can really help with that. But, and there's a lot of different models for doing rent caps. But here's the number one concern about those two things that I hear a lot is that there are going to be landlords that don't want to fill their empty houses but have to because of the vacancy tax, and so it's no longer a good investment. Mm-hmm. It hurts the value of the house. But this is the result of solving homelessness. If you solve homelessness, you also decommodify the housing industry. You're going to see housing prices fall as a result of solving homelessness because investors are going to realize that it's not as profitable as it used to be when you're forced to fill your empty properties. And this applies to the commercial building and the commercial industry. There's 1.3 million square feet of commercial spaces that's just empty, completely empty. And that's space that we can use to house homeless people. We can add no-kill animal shelters. We can do something like a second hospital, or we could add more water reclamation plants. SCV Water is stepping up and building a new water reclamation plant. Their plan is they're going to recycle, I believe it's 1/7, so that's like 16% or so of our water production by, I think it's 2035. They have a long-term plan. We need to do better than that. And I get it, SCV Water has their budget. They keep raising their prices on their customers to pay for all of these things. But I think the city at some point needs to step in and say, we need to invest in water infrastructure and ensure that we don't run out of water. Because as Henry Kissinger said, he who controls the food controls the people. And if we don't control our water supply, if we have to just rely on California to fill our Castaic Lake, then once it gets really low, California is going to start laying down the law on us. They're going to tell us to do this, this, and the other. And we're going to throw our hands up in the air because we don't have any water. So we need the water. We'll do whatever California tells us to do. That is a scenario that we need to avoid entirely. And that requires us to pick each other up from our own bootstraps.
Cool. Thank you very much for breaking that down. I do want to ask a couple of things about public safety and drug deaths that have been happening here in Santa Clarita. Public officials recently held a press conference talking about how Santa Clarita is actually leading the county in terms of fentanyl
That's so
related drug
scary.
deaths.
Yeah.
21 this year so far. That's 21 fentanyl related deaths within 8 months. Obviously, Santa Clarita has a really good relationship with our local law enforcement.
Hmm.
And in terms of public safety, we're considered to be one of the safest cities in the nation. But those two things aren't matching up. So, what more can the city be doing?
That's a good question. Fentanyl is a very, very different drug than all the other drugs.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if you criminalize drugs, as we learned from the drug war, if you criminalize drugs, you create a black market. And in the black market, you find fentanyl.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think we need to start considering bringing some of those drugs outside of the black market so that when people do those drugs, and we have to accept people are going to do those drugs. And when they do those drugs, we need to make sure that that the drug that they're consuming isn't full of fentanyl. And I think decriminalizing it would help. It would, I think it would bring about a lot of safety to the community. I think we also need safe. I know this is going to sound really controversial. I think we need safe sites, safe drug sites, where people can administer the drugs in a safe way, and we don't have any of that over here. And so, the black market is so pervasive. I remember a friend of mine. I won't say his name, but he's also homeless, and he gave me a bag, and it had weed in it, and there was little white dots throughout the whole bag. And I gave it to my friend, and I was like, "What do you think about this? What is this?" And they said, "You need to throw that out right now."
Mm-hmm.
That was weed.
Yeah.
That was weed. Now, you might be thinking, like, isn't weed legal? Not really. In Santa Clarita, you cannot smoke in public places, which I understand to some extent. Like, you don't want to smoke in front of kids or anything like that. But at the end of the day, it doesn't make sense for you to be legally allowed to smoke tobacco in front of kids and not smoke weed. So there's double standards left and right, and we just need to address those double standards. It doesn't make sense that we teach kids to not do drugs, but then we give them so much cane sugar in the meals that we give them. And I'm all for the free meal program. I love the free meal program, but it doesn't make sense that we're giving kids all of this sugar. And then, which by the way, sugar is, according to a 2016 study, sugar is more addictive than cocaine and more deadly. So it's it doesn't make sense that the government tells us to say no to drugs, but then they cause it. Another example, the FDA started the whole opioid crisis, right? Which is just it's a copy paste of when Britain dumped opium in China,
Opium wars, yeah.
the opium wars. And so, we have to tell the kids no to drugs. How about we tell the government no to drugs too? How about we figure out what's going on with this FDA? Why are they starting these crises? Why are they letting people lie so much? And we know that they've lied about a lot of things. It's dark, and it's antithetical to American exceptionalism. But I think these are the intimate questions that we need to be asking, so that we can be critical of not just the kids, but also the system that enabled those kids to get the drugs in the first place. And there's a lot of history to the drug war. There's a lot of history to the opioid crisis. And I think the best model is to basically do exactly the opposite of what all of these policies have. They've made the drug war, they've made the drug crises worse by criminalizing drugs over the last 50 years. So let's undo that. Let's keep reversing that. Let's pull weed and magic mushrooms out of the black market entirely, because those two, there's plenty of science to show that people can be reasonable adults, and they can handle certain drugs better than others. And it doesn't make sense that someone's trying magic mushrooms because they want to, experience whatever it is, and then they also have fentanyl in their mushroom. So sad. And that's, that's happening. That's happening. The whole say no to drugs things for the kids. I you're the problem with saying no to drugs, telling kids to just say no to drugs, is that you're not educating them on the drugs. You're telling them say no. Don't be curious. Don't be curious.
Without telling them why.
Without telling them why and what it is, and
Okay.
it just doesn't make sense.
Well, thank you very much. Final question for you. Why should the residents of the city of Santa Clarita vote for you in a few sentences?
In a few sentences. So, I believe that material conditions give birth to new ideas and new movements. And I'm here to bring a new perspective. Being a homeless person, having faced these adversities, having $0 in campaign contributions, I have every intention to solve this homeless problem and the housing crisis and the water shortages. And we can do this by saving money. That's what a lot of people will ask, well, how are you going to pay for it? We're already paying for it. That's the problem.
Well, thank you so much. This is Mr. Kody Amour, who is one of our 2022 City Council candidates. You can tune back into KHTS Radio for more interviews with other City Council candidates through the month of September. Thank you very much.
Thank you.